The idea here is to challenge what Ex Machina and other films suggest, to challenge the romanticized view of artificial intelligence that we have in science fiction that movies like this perpetuate to a bigger or lesser degree. Ex Machina challenged some of that to a small degree, but for the most part, the romanticization is still here. The romanticization of AI is where I would say Ex Machina derives most of its flaws. I talked about its flaws in part one. The main thing here is, question is, where does a machine like Ava, like the AI, derive its intelligence, right? Where does it derive its intelligence? How intelligent would something like this be? How does it take in information? Right? We know Ava has eyes, and we know she has ears, and we know she has all the basic sensory abilities that human beings do. But for instance, can she read PDF documents in her head? Or can she look at internet pages in her head? Stuff like that. That would be a sixth sense that an AI could have that a human being can't have, not without re-engineering the brain. The movie doesn't answer that, and it's a shame because I feel like that is within the realm of something general audiences could understand, but it cuts at the heart of why AI is so romanticized and not really seen realistically within the medium. So, what is machine intelligence? What does it mean for a machine to be intelligent? Well, actually, what does it even mean for a human being to be intelligent? Because that's not actually that well defined either, right? The question, there is fields of study in academia that try to study machine learning. How machines learn something. For instance, a friend of mine was telling me, trying to get a machine to learn to identify a picture with a dog in it. The way you would get a machine to learn that is you would show it millions of pictures with dogs and millions of pictures without dogs, and then it would set up a profile and be able to identify the difference between the two by looking at sort of general characteristics of the pixels of photographs that have dogs and photographs that do not have dogs. And the interesting thing is that these photographs can have anything else going on so long as that there are dogs in one and a lack of dogs in the other. It's not that different from how human beings learn things, honestly. You need to build memory to be able to tell the difference between one thing and another, right? That's generally how it works, except for the things that you instinctively know, except for the things that are just hard-coded in by evolution, which is a whole other thing. Machines have no evolution. There is nothing that's hard-coded in. So anything that a machine knows is something it would have to learn by this process. Unless we code something in for the machine to just know, like it evolved to know it, then that would be the same thing as what we evolved to just know intuitively. But the thing I want to point out is that a lot of people, even people that are fairly intelligent, I'd say, have actually studied a bit of programming, would probably think, perhaps, that AI machines are more intelligent than people, or they would be more intelligent than people. But that's not actually true. Well, again, I have to ask, at least, what does that mean? The obvious answer, though, is that it's not actually true. And what these movies perpetuate is the idea that it is, but it's actually not, and I'm going to explain why. Computers are better at certain tasks like searching a document very quickly and finding a specific word or a specific bit of data, or being able to predict good chess moves. But like, Ex Machina pointed out, being able to predict good chess moves is different than actually understanding why they're good and understanding what chess is. Now that's sort of the difference. And a human being obviously can't search a massive 1,000-page document and find a specific word in seconds, whereas a computer can. Why is that? Well, you might think that all machines are just better at certain things than people, or they're just smarter than people, but that's not how that works. You see, when I'm searching through a document, I'm not just looking at specific arrangements of characters as binary code. I'm getting all of this sensory data. 270 degrees of sensory data is what I'm getting. I'm also, if I'm reading the document, I'm actually getting all of the abstract information contained within. I'm also getting all of the sensory data from my body, I'm getting audio data, etc., etc. So that is the prime difference, is that the human brain, unlike any computer that we've ever built, is designed to take in a enormous slew of information from the outside world through visual data, audio data, and sensory data. There's not a single machine that could do anything like that. There's not even, there are machines that try to simulate, visuals, but they don't compare, not even remotely compare, to the visuals that our eyes simulate, right? I mean, these are the best GPUs on the planet, better than anything you'll ever find in a computer, right? It doesn't even compare. In fact, you look at most games, the draw distance isn't even that high. I mean, we generate the game world, but there's only a small chunk of it that's actually generated fully with all the assets and all the doodads that you could actually see. So there's not even comparison. A computer cannot do as much as a human brain can do. But we're so used to the idea of what a human being can do and what a human brain can do that to us this is commonplace. We don't actually compare it in its effectiveness of what it does to a machine at what the machine does. The machine cannot do as much. There's not a single machine on Earth that it can do as much as a human brain can do. Human brain can do way more. This is the most complex, most powerful computer, most powerful bit of matter on the planet. Any human being's brain, it has that title, is the most complex, most valuable piece of matter in existence in the world. So what's the difference then? Why can machines do certain things faster? Well, the difference is machines aren't looking at all the visual audio data. They're not designed to take in all the sensory data. They're designed to look at very simple pieces of abstract data within a file and figure that out. And it's all very simple, and it's all binary, and that's why a calculator can do things so much quicker calculations than a computer, because it's very simple abstract calculations, a binary. Human brain wasn't designed for that specific task. It was designed for the task of taking in all this information and dealing with abstract concepts. The human brain was designed for dealing with observing reality and analyzing abstract concepts, which essentially means using language. You're developing a language, a spoken language. Machines can't do anything like that, and that is way more complicated than anything a machine can do. And the fact and proof is that there are in fact people that can do like basic arithmetic way faster than computers can do it. You watch like the Discovery Channel. There's crazy people out there that can, they just give them an arithmetic problem. They can solve it like that, way faster than you could even type it into a a calculator, right? So what that suggests is that the brain can actually sort of be reprogrammed and can do certain specific tasks that a machine can do. It just tends not to, because it's usually intended for something else because of evolution. So what we have with machines is that they aren't as good at processing information. They just process a different kind of information. They process a very simple kind of information that we aren't designed to process. And that makes them useful for doing specific tasks, and you can have wireless internet connections, which is also something the human brain isn't capable of. And so they have access to different they usually look at smaller pieces of information, small bits of abstract information, and the machines have access to another sense that we don't, which is the ability to look at things electronically, software. And the ability to, the ability to do things wirelessly. That's the sixth sense that they have. But the point is that in terms of intelligence, there's no comparison as to who's smarter. Human beings are more intelligent by any means. More processing power for sure. We just process a different kind of information. So when we're talking about AI, the only way they would be as smart, they would be as smart as us, but that would not necessarily mean that they would be smarter than us. If Ava had the ability to read documents on the internet, there's no reason to think that she'd be able to read PDF documents faster than a human being would. That is my point. If you sit Ava or another AI that's human-like in front of a computer, or even if the computer's in their head, even if this is a sixth sense, there's no reason that she would be able to read the document faster, because her ability to read words and process sentences and the abstract information that contains should be no different than a human's, right? And understand that the ability to do that is in fact very, very advanced in and of itself. Machines currently cannot do that, okay? Like, people have this, I'm just trying to challenge this idea, like maybe someone can think that, okay, reading a book for a machine is like doing this, quickly sifting through the book, like it's nothing. But that isn't how it actually works. That's not how it actually works. If it could do that, then it would no longer be human, it would be superhuman. It would be an AI that far surpasses the human brain, right? But if it's anything like the human brain, or even approaching the human brain, it wouldn't be able to read any faster than a human being could read, because what it's doing, it's the limiting factor in how quickly it processes that information is, like, I guess, the IQ of this machine, right? Because remember, it's not just reading words, and it's taking in visual sensory data, it's taking in audio sensory data, and it's taking in abstract language data, right? Every single word in a sentence has a meaning, every sentence has its own meaning, and all of these meanings of all these words are analyzed through a massive, colossal dictionary within the brain of the subject, where all of these words are pitted against. Every single word is identified by the memory of the usage of that word that the individual has, right? That's how language works. We learn words by experiencing them and developing memories of how that word is used. So the only way you'd be able, in other words, what the AI would be doing is it would be looking at its own memories of all these words, just like I said with the memories of the dog, right? The memories of the dog photo. It would be looking at its own memories of all these words and identifying the meaning of the word via its memories of the word. If it has no memories of a certain word, it can figure out what the word means by looking at a dictionary or trying to figure it out based on context. But essentially what it's doing, it would be the exact same thing that a human being does, which means there's no reason for it to be able to do it a lot faster unless its brain is even more advanced than the human being's brain. But you understand that designing that is harder than designing a human brain. And if we design a human AI, it would not be any smarter than a human being. At most, what it would have is a sixth sense. Take human beings the way they are and nothing's different, and take an AI. At best, what it could have is a sixth sense. It could have the ability to read documents in its head without having to see them in front of it. It'd be able to visualize things and connect wirelessly to other programs and be able to look at the information within the other programs, like basically be able to browse the internet in its head. That it would be its sixth sense. But that would not make it smarter than us. That would make it have a sixth sense. Its ability to process information wouldn't be any faster unless... that's it. And its ability to process information would not be any faster. Now, what could happen is the machine could actually be able to predict good chess moves and find and do like the simple search algorithm and all that stuff the machines do today that are very effective at. It might be able to do that, but that would have to be programmed. And what would have to happen for the AI to do that is the AI's machine brain would have to stop trying to take in audio, visual, whatever data and take a moment to focus on the specific abstract abstract bits of data that are required for a machine to do a specific task, like figuring out good chess moves or doing a calculation on a calculator. Remember, you can't do that stuff as a human, because as a human, your brain is swamped with all this other information. So for an AI to do that, it would have to also have to stop looking at all this other information and focus on that specific bit of information. Unless its brain is more advanced, and again, it can somehow do both at once. But again, that's superhuman. That's no longer human AI. And if it's superhuman, coding it, creating that is more difficult. My whole point with this thing is that if we're not nowhere close to building a human AI, but as we're heading towards that level, what's going to happen is the AI isn't immediately going to surpass us, right? That isn't going to happen, because it's going to be like us. It's going to be less intelligent than us, first of all. It's going to be, for years, it's going to be way less intelligent than us. And as it approaches us, it's going to be similar in intelligence to us. And then at a certain point, we might be able to make it even smarter, but it's not going to inherently be smarter than us. Its only advantage is it has a synthetic body, so it won't have organs and excretion and all that shit, and it will have a sixth sense, the ability to connect to things wirelessly, but that is it. Now, the other thing that this follows up is maybe there's this romanticized notion that an AI could reprogram itself. But I have to, again, kill that fantasy and say that that is no different than a human being reprogramming itself. And we can't exactly reprogram ourselves, right? Now, there are things in our behavior that we could change, and there are outlooks on life that we could change, and there are certainly things that we could moderate. So we can reprogram ourselves to an extent, but there is a core programming that is hardwired through evolution that we can't change. If we could, you'd be able to make, a gay person non-gay, but you can't do that. There are things that we can't change. It would be the exact same thing for a machine. There's no way that a machine could do that any differently, right? There will be things in its firmware, it's like what you have with a regular computer. You have the operating system, and you have like the basic input and output system, and you have the assembly language and all that stuff. Well, yeah, you can program things in like a Python or Java or some higher level programming language and build small programs out of it, but you can't reprogram the entire OS out of that, right? If you want to reprogram the OS, you have to go down to a baser programming language, and even there you can't reprogram the whole thing from the ground up. If you want to reprogram the whole thing from the ground up, you have to start from scratch and just build a new system, right? It would be the same thing for an AI. It wouldn't be able to reprogram itself from the bottom up. If it wants to rebuild itself, it would have to, again, it would have to destroy itself and start from scratch, right? But like just the causality of it, right? You have to understand there are things it will be able to reprogram about itself, but it won't be able to completely wipe itself clean and turn itself into something else. That's not going to be happening. There has to be an element to the AI's consciousness that is consistent for it to be able to reprogram other parts of itself, right? It won't be, it's this consistent part that it won't be able to change. Now, it will perhaps be able to build another AI. The AI could build another AI with this consistent part that's different, but that's the same thing as what I said before. It's just building a new system from scratch. It's not actually reprogramming itself. And for it to be able to build a new system, it has to know how to build a new system. It has to learn AI theory and information theory and all that junk to be able to build the thing, right? And again, that's also really complicated. It would have to be smarter than a human being in order to do that. It would have to be way smarter than a person. In order to do that, it would have to, think about it like this. If it takes thousands of people to build an AI over decades, then there's no way that the AI will be able to surpass them all overnight and build another 10,000 more AI the next day. That's not going to happen. There's just no way that could ever possibly happen. The AI that we create will be stupid, right? You have to understand, it won't be more intelligent than us. It will be less intelligent than us, probably, but even if it's as intelligent as us, it would have to go through all the same processes that our civilization went to build it, if it wants to build another copy of itself. My point here is is this really, throws a wrench in Ava's whole plan and Ex Machina, because she can't do shit. Unless she knows AI theory, unless she's super advanced, she can't do any of that. She's much less, she's in a much less tenable position to do anything than a normal human being. But because she's a robot, we somehow think that she has an advantage. And again, it's the whole romanticization thing. And it's not a huge problem. It just, I just have this perspective that's like, I don't necessarily want people to look at that and think that this is how the science works, right? I want for there to be information, videos like mine or that sort of try to explain that this is not actually how the science works. And the way the science actually works is there's no way for an AI to be more intelligent than a human being like that. Being a machine doesn't make it more intelligent. To make it more intelligent, now that is possible to make an AI more intelligent than a human, but then what you're doing is you're making a superhuman. It would be the same exact task as making a superhuman, only out of wires rather than out of, biology skin. And sure, that's something that you could maybe do, but that would be even more work than creating a human AI. And it would not come out like that by default. You would have to put even more work in to make it that, give it the ability to process information even more quickly than a human being could, and process more information than a human being could. And if you did that, well, then you'd be able to say it's a superhuman. It's the same thing with things like Google, for instance. Google, in Ex Machina, the guy used Google to design how Ava thinks. Well, see, Google is, you could say Google is an AI, but you can't possibly say that it's as intelligent as a human being. Because again, what it's doing is very different. Google isn't looking at visual information, it's not looking at audio information, it's not even looking at language or abstract information, it's looking at text, right? Looking at text is different than looking at language. Looking at language is looking at the abstract meanings of words. Looking at text is just looking at pixels, very specific pixels of words and how they're arranged. That's all that Google's doing when it's those search algorithms in Google. Now they're still really, really advanced in the stuff that they can do, but they focus on just the text, and our brains can't do that, right? An AI that could do that, an AI that could somehow that could somehow morph its brain into looking at just the text, could all do all the shit that Google does, and all the shit that a human being does. But you would have to design some kind of way for it to be able to go from the sort of human state of thinking to the Google state of thinking, because the human state of thinking is you're looking at mostly visual information, and that would take up all of its processing power, unless you gave it more processing power, but then that's the whole thing I said earlier. Then you're building a superhuman. If it has more processing power than a human brain. The point is, if an AI has the same amount of processing power that a human brain, there's no way that it could do anything more than a human being could unless it's programmed with the purpose of looking at a different kind of information than what the human brain is looking for. That's all I want to say about that. Just the notion of machine intelligence is just, it's really complicated, and it's not the case that they're inherently smarter and better than us. In fact, I imagine that the first AI that will ever be built that could possibly be considered consciousnesses will be very, very primitive consciousnesses. They will be like simpler than children, and they'll be like bacteria or something. The first living AI will be something akin to a bacterium. We might actually already have that. Because bacterium, they don't really act independently, although they somewhat do. We might already have AI that are kind of like that are functionally, intelligence-wise, equivalent to a single bacterium or a single protist or whatever, or a virus. We have viruses, right? I don't know. The point is, there's a whole further to get. The first AI that are even remotely conscious will be like really, really primitive and stupid animals. That's what they're going to resemble. and then eventually we're going to build up to human. But that's another thing I want to point out. By the time we get there, we ourselves won't exactly be human anymore. We're building these programs and trying to make them more and more advanced like human beings, but will we still be human at that point? Because think about it, we're all like we are becoming more digital, right? We are integrating ourselves with technology every single second. I've actually heard people describe the internet as a brain extension. Imagine being connected to the internet through sensor data. Imagine if someone could invent a device, like a phone, only it's not a phone, it's something you just plugs into your head, that gives you the ability to access to the internet in your mind. Right? Like that sixth sense I mentioned, the ability to connect to things wirelessly. That, a neural interface, that's what that is called. Now that is going to be around long before a real AI is, right? And at that point we are essentially better, we are already essentially the most that an AI could ever be without being a superhuman AI. So there's that. I mean, our organs are going to be all synthetic. People are going to start inventing synthetic organs, synthetic hearts. Things that could help a person live longer. Synthetic hearts that don't have heart disease, synthetic, bowels or whatever. Eventually, synthetic skin, and eventually we are the robots. And past that, we might even get synthetic brains. Or figure out a way to download our brains onto some kind of machine software and live, have that sort of have the brain extension thing, like I said, only it instead of sort of just a visual extension where you see it, you're not actually connected to it. This way you'll actually be connected to this brain extension, and immortality comes across through that as well. You get the idea. There's a whole open field of study of just enhancing human beings, enhancing ourselves with technology so that we become superhuman rather than simply building a program that can resemble us. At that point, building a program that will resemble us will lose its meaning, I think, because at that point we ourselves are kind of going to be the programs. I don't know enough about the research, but I think that just my own intuition says that by the time that we could actually build AI, we're gonna resemble AI. Like it's not gonna be this thing where we're still human just like we are now, and then a robot appears. That's not gonna happen. It's gonna look a lot more like we will resemble the AI a lot at that point. We will be very robotic. So that's sort of another error that these movies make, is that they always happen to assume that we've built AI, but we're exactly the same as we always were and have been for years. We're just living in modern society, but we're still human, right? See, I don't think that we will exactly be, what's thought of as classically human by the time AI come around. I think we're going to be, a couple moon steps past that. In the very least, even if AI is possible or impossible, us evolving into superhuman, enhancing ourselves with, physically enhancing ourselves with technology, that is still a prospect. So looking at the question, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a machine? It's really not even like we're looking at what the machine itself can do, but what we should really be looking at is another. So not what we should really be looking at, but another interesting question is, what are our own limitations, and will we surpass our own limitations and become, sort of transcend what it means to be human ourselves? Because if that's true, then whether or not we could build a program that can resemble a human being is kind of pointless. Although it will be interesting if we transcend and become superhuman, and there's still and then we still decide to build an AI that's just, regular human. That's still just an interesting pet project, I'd say. But it's just more food for thought. What does it mean to be a machine then? Because people are asking, what does it mean to be human with the face of all this technological advancement that's happening today? What does it really mean to be human? Are we losing touch with our humanity? I'm a lot more interested in what will it mean for humanity once we do transcend? Like, what will it mean to be conscious to be a consciousness? What will it mean to exist and be and live and be in a culture and be in a civilization once we have transcended our humanity, once we are no longer human, once we are machine-like or cyborg-like or synthetic, at least partially synthetic? What will it mean then? Because what we're looking at then, we're not just looking at the prospects of our individual lives. At that point, we're looking at immortality, and we're looking at just the overall prospects of our civilization. Individual strife doesn't even matter at that point. At that point, we have transcended we have transcended this biological form to the point where anything we do, none of this stuff really matters. Everything is fine. Everything's good. There's no risk of dying. There's no risk of there's not much risk of dying. There's not much risk of living uncomfortably. We're machine-like, and the everyday life of every person has been perfected. What are we going to do? Well, there's questions about expanding into space and looking for materials in space and inventing faster-than-light travel, and the end goals of our civilization, the end game, so to speak, is what becomes the primary area of philosophical inquiry, not what does it mean for us to be human. That's why when I say what does it mean to be a machine, that's sort of what I mean. What will it mean, for a civilization of machine humans, superhumans that have evolved themselves and integrated themselves with technology? What will it mean for them, to exist in a civilization? What will it mean for them? What are they going to be striving for? And I have theories on what it's to strive for, and when I talk about utopias in my other videos, that's usually what I have envisioned is a society of machine humans, not really a society of regular humans. A society of regular humans couldn't build a utopia. Probably not, at least. It's all besides the point. Okay, the other notion of romanticization within AI fiction that I have to attack is the notion of AI morality. There's a lot of concern about AI morality, and in other places, it's usually, again, it's one of two things, like I said in the fucking last video. It's either utopic or dystopic. With Ava's case, it's more leaning towards the dystopic side. It's leaning towards she's a malign AI side. With as Isaac Asimov, it's all the utopic side. A robot can never harm a human being. A robot can never do something or through an action cause a human being to fall into harm, etc., etc. With things like The Matrix and Terminator and all that stuff, AI rebel and attack human beings. So both of these things are iffy in their own way. You see, the question of the question of an AI's morality, to understand what an AI's morality would be, because I think these movies just sort of assume it's either one way or the other. It's either going to be a perfectly good morality or it's going to be a horribly evil morality because the machines realize they're better than us or some shit, which they aren't, like I just proved. But other than that, they somehow want us gone. They are better than us in the terms that they don't need to excrete or eat. They just charge with electricity. That is one advantage that they will have. But other than that, anyway, so yeah, it's this whole dystopic thing. So how do you... Jesus, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, the idea is proving the AI's morality, right? To understand an AI's morality, we first have to question where our own morality comes from. And in simplest terms, human morality is essentially either an evolutionarily hardwired thing or something that is built through experience and upbringing, but it is a means for an entity, an organism, to seek out positive stimuli and avoid negative stimuli. That is what it is at its core. It is avoiding negative stimuli that threaten survival or seeking positive stimuli that ensure survival. If something's annoying you or something makes your life uncomfortable, that doesn't necessarily threaten your survival, but you still avoid it. Well, one could make the argument that that is still something that evolution has cooked up for us as another means of ensuring survival in the long run. Of, that if a human being seeks, comfort and shelter and just ease of life, then that ensures its continuation and its survival and the propagation of its species. And remember, you have to think of human beings as just machines that have been coded to survive with one another by evolution. And we have a lot of tools that evolution has created for us in order to ensure this happening. Things like empathy, things like sex drives, so on and so forth. So morality all of it is essentially this. It's a very elaborate means of survival. That doesn't diminish morality at all. It's still wonderful and beautiful and all that jazz, but it's just a very elaborate means of survival. Even stuff like art. I've heard the argument. I've heard it written, like I've read things that have suggested that even contemplative appreciation that human beings have for art is still something that was naturally selected as a means of ensuring survival, as a means of sort of decreasing the chances of encountering a negative stimulus in the long run. And it has some sense to it, because think about it like this. With art, with storytelling, you can vicariously experience the life of another without actually being there. Now, what that provides for you is you can understand the experiences that without actually having been there, right? You can feel sort of what it's like to have lived in another's shoes without actually having lived in those shoes, right? Which is good, because see, if that person suffers and dies and encounters negative stimuli, you don't actually want to be in their shoes, right? You don't actually need to be in their shoes to understand why you don't want to be in their shoes, right? From an evolutionary perspective, it makes perfect sense for human beings to appreciate art, because it's by appreciating art that we sort of learn what to seek and what to avoid, as a civilization in our own lives. That's what AI culture has actually done. AI fiction has developed this notion, this idea that AI is something we should avoid, that it might be a negative stimulus. But I think this isn't something that nature's selecting for. I think that this fiction is a bad mutation of human evolution. But you understand my point, is it's like everything we experience in art is just a means of us knowing. It's a way for us to experience others' lives without actually having to experience them, which gives us an advantage, because if we can experience another's life in this way, what we can do is we can look at this person's life and detect the positive and negative stimulus in their life, and then we know that if we ever get in that situation, then we know what to do and what to avoid. That's why I look at like horror movies. People who watch horror movies, they know what mistakes not to make if they're in that kind of position, right? That's why everyone who watches horror movies says how stupid these people are, right? Horror movies, in a way, condition us to be smarter in a situation resembling a horror movie. That's what I think, at least. I criticize them for being stupid, but that's besides the point. The point is, you can use art. Art can be, evolutionarily, it's a way for us to teach ourselves to avoid negative stimulus. Anyway, I've gone way off topic. The point is, what does morality boils down to this thing where the organism seeks its own survival and positive stimulus and avoids negative stimulus. And positive stimulus, it's all essentially a means of survival. For simplicity's sake, you can look at it like that, right? Even if that's not exactly true. Even if some things we just evolve just for the fuck of it, right? It's not actually something that's designed for our survival. Doesn't matter, okay? Just pretend, right? Well, if this is what morality is, we have to, imagine that it would be the same thing for a machine, right? A machine, we're developing them to think exactly like a human being. That's what an AI is. And there's no real other way that a consciousness could be, right? Right? What does it mean to be a consciousness? Now, we haven't encountered consciousness in any form where it doesn't seek positive stimuli and avoid negative stimuli. In fact, I think regardless of whether or not we're human, I think this is something that is inherent to every consciousness, is the ability to seek positive stimulus and avoid negative stimulus. That is what morality is. That's what's specific about consciousness, is that consciousness, sentience, has morality. It has this ability to characterize things as positive and negative, and to seek the positive and avoid the negative. So, we have an AI then, and the AI has morality, but how do we know what counts as positive and what counts as negative for the AI? So why is it okay to assume that the AI is just going to turn on us? Well, we have positive and negative from evolution, right? Most human beings have a degree of empathy for their children and their family because it helps us survive. So, well, the thing is that is something that nature coded. That is something that nature designed. With the AI, it's something we're designing. So we're designing the AI's morality. So the question is, how could we ever design the morality to make it a malicious AI, right? We could easily design the AI in such a way, code it in its morality in such a way that what it's looking for primarily is its positive stimulus is anything that furthers the development and advancement of the human species. The AI could be perfectly altruistic and selfless. It can look for the advancement of all of humanity to its own detriment. It can look for this. And a negative stimulus for the AI would be anything that hurts humans and anything that hurts humanity. And this essentially becomes what Isaac Asimov had, where you have AI that are essentially angels and perfect helper robots. That's a lot more likely than the alternative. Now, the only way that something like in The Matrix could happen, or something in Terminator could happen, or like Skynet, would be if Skynet, for some reason, was designed, if Skynet decided to, if for Skynet the positive stimulus was killing humanity and the negative stimulus was was not killing humanity. In other words, if it saw humanity as a threat to its own survival, right? But again, that presumes that Skynet cares about its own survival, that its own survival is a positive stimulus. Why would we design the AI to have its own survival as a positive stimulus? We don't necessarily need the AI to prioritize its own survival. We can easily design it in such a way that it prioritizes the survival of another over itself. And that's way more likely to happen. Now, the only way that won't, if the AI somehow gets it twisted and has the two things reversed, would be if there's some kind of massive viral infection not even a viral infection, that wouldn't even be enough to do it. You would need to rebuild the AI from the ground up, right? Because remember, just like a human being, there are things that are hardwired through evolution. It's very primitive, important, subconscious things. And we're talking about something that's on the same level for a machine. Changing that, well, you can't just sort of change it. And there's no way that the AI could really get it twisted, right? I mean, there's no way that an AI could possibly think that destroying humanity is for humanity's benefit if it's hardwired, designed to look for humanity's benefit. There's no way that could happen. Unless there's some huge error in how it was designed, unless it was designed by idiots that didn't know what they were doing. The other possibility is that it was designed by a crazy scientist that wanted the AI to be malign. Then the AI would come out evil, sure, and seek to destroy humans. Yeah, that could happen. Kind of a Frankenstein's monster type situation. But why would someone do that? Honestly, someone like, what's his name, Nathan, basically did within Ex Machina. That's why my whole criticism of him was that he literally built machines that wanted to kill him. Why did he build machines that wanted to kill him? Why didn't he make them love him instead of kill him, right? The movie played on the fact that he really didn't have control over their minds, which doesn't make sense because he built them, right? It's just not how that's just not how causality works. You control the way their brain works. You should design them to love you. Unless he was just a crazy person playing a role. I don't know. But with the advent of AI, what's a lot more likely to happen if we're afraid of dystopias is that a crazy person somewhere builds an AI that wants to kill everyone rather than society somehow is destroyed by its own creation. That is much less likely to happen. There would have to be a lot of errors would have to happen. A lot of things would have to go wrong. They would have to build this thing from the ground up as a fundamentally crazy and flawed entity that will somehow think to do humans harm whilst not actually being designed to do humans harm. So it's very... I really doubt that that's going to happen. That is so unlikely. Like, I think it would have to be programmed for that, or it would have to be a fundamentally, like, insane machine to do that. And, I mean, I mentioned viruses, but a virus could never... Like, it's hard to imagine that a virus could reprogram the thing from the ground up, right? A virus can affect its sort of... Again, it's just like how viruses work. Viruses are information, just like everything else. You know, if you're infected with a virus, it won't... Like, it can cause brain damage, a virus can cause brain damage, it can cause organ damage, but it can't reprogram the way your brain works, right? That's not how viruses work for human beings. Those viruses, what they do is, they're very simple, very simple bits of code, and what they do is they create, primitive, simple damage to your systems on a smaller, sort of, a lower level of complexity. Reprogramming the machine is a much higher level of complexity. So something that could do that wouldn't be a virus or even a bug. What it would be is, a software update, and a massive software update that would rebuild the machine from the ground up. And again, it's that whole thing I said before. If you want to reprogram the machine to behave differently, to have a different system of ethics, you have to build it from the ground up, because I think ethics for humanity is something that is very inherently just grounded in evolution and grounded in the most fundamental level. And to change that is you'd have to just rebuild the whole machine. You can't just tweak a few things here and there and suddenly the happy robot becomes an angry robot. It's not how it's going to work. That's why it's just another thing. Another thing is that whole thing is just a bug happens and the AI becomes evil. That's also something that's not possible. However, bugs can happen and viruses can happen, and what they might actually do is that they could screw up some of the robot's higher level functioning. Maybe it won't be able to move its arms, or maybe it won't be able to use its senses, or maybe you could shut down different parts of its bodies, or maybe you could reprogram its speech mechanism so that it just starts saying, like, hateful words or something, or some kind of joke virus that makes the AI just scream profanities everywhere it goes. Something like that could happen. Essentially, viruses at this level are the equivalent of they're not even the equivalent of sort of biological viruses. They're the equivalent of something like some kind of drug that a person can take that can influence their behavior. A virus affecting an AI would be the equivalent of alcohol on a human, or it would be the equivalent of taking some anti-ADD medication or something like that. Mood-altering drugs, state-altering drugs. That's the only... And even that doesn't reprogram the machine. That just, again, that alters higher-level functioning. So you can imagine bugs doing stuff like that. So, that's basically it. That's just the three things that I had to criticize. The intelligence thing, that they're somehow more intelligent than us. They won't be. The morality thing, and how we will be partially synthetic by the time that AI even come around. So, if you're worried about the advent of AI, don't be. I mean, if you're worried about it in that it's going to kill us, it won't. It's not going to kill us, it's not going to do us harm, it's not going to destroy anything. The only thing that is getting eroded is the idea of our classic humanity, is the what does it mean to be human. That notion is getting eroded because of technology, And there's simply no avoiding that. That is something you would have to make your peace with, and that can be difficult and frustrating, and there's problems with that. Yeah, I understand. It's there's definitely an attachment that human beings have to their own humanity, which I think is motivated by a fear of any kind of otherness. Unfortunately, the advent of AI and the advent of our own evolving into machines, it's not avoidable. It's inevitable, and at some point, every single person is going to realize that it is in their interest, because the advantages that these machines possess, that being evolving into a machine-like entity, the advantage that carries with it is too tremendous to ignore. The ability to live forever, infinitely, the ability to not have to suffer in ways that most human beings do. It doesn't mean we ignore human suffering, that we look at human suffering in something like a movie and no longer feel anything. It just means we don't have to experience that kind of suffering in real life. I mean, I think that it's all going to happen, and it's all just the nature of the thing. That's just the future. Any advanced spacefaring civilization probably won't be the kind of spacefaring species you see in movies and Star Trek and video games and all that stuff. It's probably going to be a race of machines or machine-like entities that have invented faster-than-light travel. A hell of a lot more likely than humans having invented faster-than-light travel. The only way it's possible, I guess, I mean, that's a whole... I'm getting off topic. But that might be possible if you give some primitive humans faster-than-light travel. If you do that, then perhaps you can get faster than light travel the same way you see it in something like Star Trek. But with the natural progression of things, we are becoming more and more synthetic, and there's just nothing that's going to stop it. And it's not necessarily something you want to stop. There are we've experienced what it means to be human for quite some time now. We've had thousands of years, hundreds of millions of years to experience what it means to be human. What this means to be human, everyday humans, right? This is sort of a new thing, a new experience. It's a way for our species to transcend our humanity and go on to do something else, something new and exciting that we haven't actually seen yet. And I think that most of that will revolve around traveling to the far reaches of the universe and creating new life. I think that is the end game of our civilization. Faster than light travel and creation. That's sort of the next level of art. That is a new medium of art that we haven't seen yet. Right now we've seen film, storytelling, video games. The next level is literally building civilizations on other planets. That's what's going to happen. At least, if my imagination is to be believed. Last thing I want to mention is what kind of movie I think would actually do AI accurately justice. Because Ex Machina did not do AI accurately, with all the things I pointed out. There are so many assumptions within that movie about Ava's intelligence and Ava's morality that don't really gel when you can consider how an AI's intelligence and morality actually come about. So what would be a good movie? Well, I think it's really hard to picture the state that humanity is going to be in when AI is created. As I pointed out, it's very likely possible that we will already be partially synthetic. So we'd have to perhaps assume that won't be the case. I think what would be interesting, at least better in terms of scientific accuracy, better in terms of realism, which I think is just objectively better as well. But in terms of realism, what you'd want an AI movie that is highly, highly realistic. So an AI movie where essentially an AI movie that maybe even plays kind of like a documentary, where you have all these scientists and all these different scientist-type characters, and they're trying to build these synthetic machines, and they have some basic primitive synthetic machines working, and they build some more advanced synthetic machines, not too advanced yet, or maybe there are some fairly, highly advanced, because you can't have some simple AI and then just jump to super good AI. That's never how it works, because if you have by the time that you can create like super advanced AI, there's already like all of the simple AI, all of the primitive AI, all the AI that are like as intelligent as dogs or something. Those are going to be all over society at that point. They will be widespread as hell, which makes the whole scenario very hard to imagine. The effect that would have, it's very hard to picture. That's why these movies are ridiculous, is because they assume it's like nothing else has changed, the world hasn't been affected, but this one person somehow made the jump to super advanced AI. That could never take place. So I think a movie that's highly realistic will either showcase the spreading of AI, primitive AI technology, AI that resemble, very simple animals in terms of intelligence, have the spreading of this technology throughout society, or it'll show the development of technology like this within laboratories. And what might be interesting is showing how these simple programs, how they interact with each other, with human beings, and obviously you'd want to showcase that their intelligence and that they are in fact AI, right? But they are not in fact, but they are still, not that intelligent. They're still pretty stupid, and they're no more intelligent than maybe some smart animals. And you'd want to show them interacting with each other, and maybe you could show the downside of having these things in the first place. Maybe you can show how they have problems and there's bugs in the code, and that these machines can, their day-to-day operations can malfunction because of bugs or viruses or stuff like that. They don't become evil and want to kill everything. Remember, they're not designed that way. They won't ever do that. But there are bugs in the code that sort of affect them. That would be a very interesting, very cool movie. It would be very hard to actually think of. A movie like that, I would imagine, would have to be highly based on sort of real AI research. So for this movie to have the intended level of realism, what would need to happen is the people writing it would need to know all about machine learning and AI research as it happens today. They would have to know all the research. They wouldn't have to know all the research, but they would have to at least be, fairly literate in the research. Like way more literate than I am. Like I would have to read maybe hundreds of pages before actually figuring out how it works to a sufficient level to be able to do a movie like that justice. And that's something that someone should honestly think of. It might be too esoteric for general audiences, but I think if you're a good writer, then you can still make something that's very esoteric, entertaining, even for the common masses that aren't necessarily literate. And you definitely want to present the information to people who are in an interesting way to people who are literate. So the good thing about Ex Machina is it kind of does that. It's a much smarter movie than your average movie, and not because it makes sense, but because I have to give it credit. It touches on a much more difficult subject, and it does so in a fairly intelligent fashion. So give it credit for that. I'm just sort of thinking of the next step, something that's even smarter and has even more intellect to it. Anyway, it's just food for thought. Very interesting stuff to think about, and I just have to say, don't be afraid of the advent of artificial intelligence technology. Embrace it. Cheers.